2. A young man with a determined set to his shoulders stood outside the door of a little cottage perched upon a bluff overlooking the sound. The chill sea air was sweet with the scent of roses, and he drew in a deep breath of inspiration before he knocked. "Are you not surprised to see me?" he inquired of the young person who opened the door. "Not at all," replied the young person demurely. He gave her a quick, almost fierce look. At their last parting, he had declared that he would not come again unless she requested him, and that she assuredly had not done. "I wish I could make you feel," said he. She laughed, a pretty infectious laugh, which exorcised all his gloom. He looked down upon her as they stood together under the cluster of electric lights in her cozy little sitting room. Such a slender, girlish figure, such a soft cheek, red mouth, and firm little chin. Often, in his dreams of her, he had taken her into his arms and coaxed her into a good humor. But alas, dreams are not realities, and the calm friendliness of this young person made any demonstration of tenderness well nigh impossible. But for the shy regard of her eyes, you might have thought that he was no more to her than a friendly acquaintance. Okay, now where was I? "I hear," she said, taking up some needlework, "that your Welland case comes on tomorrow." "Yes," answered the young lawyer, "and I have all my witnesses ready." "So I hear. Has Mr. Graves," she retorted. "You are going to have a hard fight." "Oh, what of that, when in the end I'll win?" He looked over at her with a bright gleam in his eyes. "I wouldn't be too sure," she warned demurely. "You may lose on a technicality." He drew his chair a little nearer to her side and turned over the pages of a book lying on her work table. On the flyleaf was inscribed in a man's writing, "To the dear little woman whose friendship is worth a fortune." Another book beside it bore the inscription, "With the love of all the firm, including the boys," and a volume of poems above it was dedicated to the young person "with high regards and staunch affection" of some other masculine person. Will Carmen pushed aside these evidences of his sweetheart's popularity and leaned across the table. "Alice," he said, "once upon a time, you admitted that you loved me." A blush suffused the young person's countenance. "Did I?" she queried. "You did, indeed." "Well?" "Well, if you love me, and I love you—" "Oh, please," protested the girl, covering her ears with her hands. "I will please," asserted the young man. "I've come here tonight, Alice, to ask you to marry me, and at once." "Dearie me!" exclaimed the young person, but she let her needlework fall into her lap as her lover, approaching nearer, laid his arm around her shoulders and, bending his face close to hers, pleaded his most important case. If for a moment the small mouth quivered, the firm little chin lost its firmness, and the proud little head yielded to the pressure of a lover's arm, it was only for a moment, so brief and fleeting that Will Carman had hardly become aware of it before it had passed. "No," said the young person sorrowfully but decidedly. She had arisen and was standing on the other side of the table facing him. "I cannot marry you while your mother regards me as beneath you." When she knows you, she will acknowledge you are above me. But I'm not asking you to come to my mother. I'm asking you to come to me, dear. If you will put your hand in mine and trust to me through all the coming years, no man or woman born can come between us. But the young person shook her head. No, she repeated, I will not be your wife unless your mother welcomes me with pride and with pleasure. The night air was still sweet with the perfume of roses as Will Carman passed out of the little cottage door, but he drew in no deep breath of inspiration. His impetuous Irish heart was too heavy with disappointment. It might have been a little lighter, however, had he known that the eyes of the young person who gazed after him were misty with love and yearning beyond expression. 3. Will Carman has failed to snare his bird. Oops, that's a guy. Will Carman has failed to snare his bird, said Mr. said Mr. Spring Fragrance to Mrs. Spring Fragrance. Their neighbor's son had just passed their veranda without turning to bestow upon him his usual cheerful greeting. It's too bad, sighed Mrs. Spring Fragrance sympathetically. She clasped her hands together and exclaimed, Ah, these Americans, these mysterious, inscrutable, incomprehensible Americans. Had I the divine right of learning, I would put them into an immortal book. The divine right of learning, echoed Mr. Spring Fragrance. Mrs. Spring Fragrance looked up into her husband's face in wonderment. Is not the authority of the scholar, the student, almost divine? She queried. So 'tis, responded he. So it seems. The evening before, Mr. Spring Fragrance, together with several Seattle and San Francisco merchants, had given a dinner to a number of young students who had just arrived from China. The morning papers had devoted several columns to laudation of the students, prophecies as to their future, and the great influence with which they would exercise over the destiny of their nation. But no comment whatever was made on the givers of the feast, and Mr. Spring Fragrance was therefore feeling somewhat underappreciated. Were not he and his brother merchants worthy of a little attention? If the students had come to learn things in America, they, the merchants, had accomplished things. There were those amongst them who had been instrumental in bringing several of the students to America. One of the boys was Mr. Spring Fragrance's own young brother, for whose maintenance and education he himself sent the wherewithal every year for many years. Mr. Spring Fragrance, though well read in the Chinese classics, was not himself a scholar. As a boy, he had come to the shores of America, worked his way up, and by dint of painstaking study after working hours, acquired the Western language and Western business ideas. He had made money, saved money, and sent money home. The years had flown. His business had grown. Through his efforts, trade between his native town and the port city in which he lived had greatly increased. A school in Canton was being builded in part with funds furnished by him, and a railway syndicate, for the purpose of constructing a line of railway from the big city of Canton to his own native town, was under process of formation, with the name of Spring Fragrance at its head. No wonder, then, that Mr. Spring Fragrance muttered, "Humph," when Mrs. Spring Fragrance dilated upon the divine right of learning, and that he should feel irritated and humiliated when, after explaining to her his grievances, she should quote in the words of Confucius, "Be not concerned that men do not know you. Be only concerned that you do not know them." and he had expected wifely sympathy. He was about to leave the room in a somewhat chilled state of mind when she surprised him again by pattering across to him and following up a low curtsy with these words: "I bow to you as the grass bends to the wind. Allow me to detain you for just one moment." Mr. Spring Fragrance eyed her for a moment with suspicion. "As I have told you, O great man," continued Mrs. Spring Fragrance, "I desire to write an immortal book. And now that I have learned from you that it is not necessary to acquire the divine right of learning in order to accomplish things, I will begin the work without delay. My first subject will be the inferior woman of America. Please advise me how I shall best inform myself concerning her." Mr. Spring Fragrance, perceiving that his wife was now serious, and being easily mollified, sat himself down and rubbed his head. After thinking for a few moments, he replied, "It is the way in America, when a person is to be illustrated, for the illustrator to interview the person's friends. Perhaps, my dear, you had better confer with the superior woman." "Surely," cried Mrs. Spring Fragrance, "no sage was ever so wise as my great man." "But I lack the divine right of learning," dryly deplored Mr. Spring Fragrance. "I am happy to hear it," answered Mrs. Spring Fragrance. "If you were a scholar, you would have no time to read American poetry and American newspapers." Mr. Spring Fragrance laughed heartily. "You are no Chinese woman," he teased. "You are an American." "Please bring me my parasol and my folding fan," said Mrs. Spring Fragrance. "I am going out for a walk." And Mr. Spring Fragrance obeyed her. 4. "This is from Mary Carmen, who is in Portland," said the mother of the superior woman, looking up from the reading of a letter as her daughter came in from the garden. "Indeed," carelessly responded Miss Evebrooke. "Yes, it's chiefly about Will." "Oh, is it? Well, read it then, dear. I'm interested in Will Carmen because of Alice Winthrop. I had hoped, Ethel, at one time that you would have been interested in him for his own sake. However, this is what she writes. I came here chiefly to rid myself of a melancholy mood which has taken possession of me lately, and also because I cannot bear to see my boy so changed toward me, owing to his infatuation for Alice Winthrop. It is incomprehensible to me how a son of mine can find any pleasure whatever in the society of such a girl. I have traced her history and find that she is not only uneducated in the ordinary sense, but her environment, from childhood up, has been the sordid and demoralizing one of extreme poverty and ignorance. This girl, Alice, entered a law office at the age of 14, supposedly to do the work of an office boy. Now, after 7 years in business, through the friendship and influence of men far above her socially, she holds the position of private secretary to the most influential man in Washington, a position which by rights belongs only to a well-educated young woman of good family. Many such applied. I myself sought to have Jane Walker appointed. Is it not disheartening to our women's cause to be compelled to realize that girls such as this one can win men over to be their friends and lovers, when there are so many splendid young women who have been carefully trained to be companions and comrades of educated men? Pardon me, mother, interrupted Miss Evebrooke. But I have heard enough. Mrs. Carman is your friend, and a well-meaning woman sometimes, but a woman suffragist, in the true sense, she certainly is not. Mark my words, if any young man had accomplished for himself what Alice Winthrop has accomplished, Mrs. Carman could not have said enough in his praise. It is women such as Alice Winthrop who, in spite of every drawback, have raised themselves to the level of those who have had every advantage, who are the pride and glory of America. There are thousands of them, all over this land, women who have been service to others all their years, and who have graduated from the University of Life with honor. Women such as I, who are called the superior women of America, are, after all, nothing but schoolgirls in comparison. Mrs. Evebrooke eyed her daughter mutinously. I don't see why you should feel like that, she said. Alice is a dear, bright girl, and it is prejudice engendered by Mary Carman's disappointment about you and Will, which is the real cause of poor Mary's bitterness toward her. But to my mind, Alice does not compare with my daughter. She would be frightened to death if she had to make such a speech. You foolish mother, rallied Miss Evebrooke. To stand upon a platform of women's suffragette meetings and exploit myself is certainly a great recompense to you and father for all the sacrifices you have made in my behalf. But since it pleases you, I do it with pleasure, even on the nights when my beau should come a courting. There is many a one who would like to come, Ethel. You are the handsomest girl in this western town, and you know it. Stop that, mother. You know very well I have set my mind upon having 10 years' freedom. 10 years in which to love, live, suffer, see the world, and learn about men, not schoolboys, before I choose one. Alice Winthrop is the same age as you are, and looks like a child beside you. Physically, maybe, but her heart and mind are better developed. She has been out in the world all her life. I only a few months. Your lecture last week on the opposite sex was splendid. Of course, I have studied 100 books on the subject and attended 50 lectures. All that was necessary was to repeat in an original manner what was not by any means original. Miss Evebrooke went over to a desk and took a paper therefrom. This, she said, is what Alice has written me in reply to my note, suggesting that she attend next week the suffrage meeting and give some of the experiences of her business career. The object I had in view when I requested the relation of her experiences was to use them as illustrations of the suppression and oppression of women by men. Strange to say, Alice and I have never conversed on this particular subject. If we had, I would not have made this request of her, nor written her as I did. Listen, I should dearly love to please you, but I am afraid that my experiences, if related, would not help the cause. It may be, as you say, that men prevent women from rising to their level, but if there are such men, I have not met them. Ever since, when a little girl, I walked into a law office and asked for work, and the senior member kindly looked me over through his spectacles and inquired if I thought I could learn to index books, and the junior member glanced under my hat and said, "This is a pretty little girl, and we must be pretty to her." I have loved and respected the men amongst whom I have worked and wherever I have worked. I may have been exceptionally fortunate, but I know this. The men for whom I have worked, and amongst whom I have spent my life, whether they have been business or professional men, students or great lawyers and politicians, all alike have upheld me, inspired me, advised me, taught me, given me a broad outlook upon life for a woman, interested me in themselves and in their work. As to corrupting my mind and my morals, as you say so many men do, when they have young and innocent girls to deal with, as a woman, I look back over my years spent amongst business and professional men and see myself, as I was at first, an impressionable, ignorant little girl, born a bohemian, easy to lead and easy to win, but born aloft and morally supported by the goodness of my brother men, the men amongst whom I worked. That is why, dear Ethel, you will have to forgive me, because I cannot carry out your design and help your work, as otherwise I would like to do. That, mother, declared Miss Evebrook, answers all Mrs. Carman's insinuations, and should make her ashamed of herself. Can anyone know the sentiments which little Alice entertains toward men, and wonder at her winning out as she has? Mrs. Evebrook was about to make reply, when her glance, happening to stray out of the window, she noticed a pink parasol. Mrs. Spring Fragrance, she ejaculated, while her daughter went to the door and invited the owner of the pink parasol, who was seated in a veranda rocker, calmly writing in a notebook. I am so sorry that we did not hear your ring, Mrs. Spring Fragrance, said she. There is no necessity for you to sorrow, replied the little Chinese woman. I did not expect you to hear a ring which rang not. I failed to pull the bell. You forgot, I suppose, suggested Ethel Evebrook. Is it wise to tell secrets? Ingenuously, ingenuously inquired Mrs. Spring Fragrance. Yes, to your friends. Oh, Mrs. Spring Fragrance, you are so refreshing. I have pleasure, then, in confiding in you. I have an ambition to accomplish an immortal book about the Americans, and the conversation I heard through the window was so interesting to me that I thought I would take down some of it for my book before I intruded myself. With your kind permission, I will translate for your correction. I shall be delighted, honored, said Miss Evebrook, her cheeks glowing and her laugh rippling, if you will promise me that you will also translate for our friend, Mrs. Carman. Ah, yes, poor Mrs. Carman. My heart is so sad for her, murmured the little Chinese woman. 5. When the mother of Will Carman returned from Portland, the first person upon whom she called was Mrs. Spring Fragrance. Having lived in China while her late husband was in the customs service there, Mrs. Carman's prejudices did not extend to the Chinese, and ever since the Spring Fragrances had become the occupants of the villa beside the Carmans, there had been social good feeling between the American and Chinese families. Indeed, Mrs. Carman was wont to declare that amongst all her acquaintances, there was not one more congenial and interesting than little Mrs. Spring Fragrance. So after she had sipped a cup of delicious tea, tasted some piquant candied limes, and told Mrs. Spring Fragrance all about her visit to the Oregon City and the Chinese people she had met there, she reverted to a personal trouble confided to Mrs. Spring Fragrance some months before, and dwelt upon it for more than half an hour. Then she checked herself and gazed at Mrs. Spring Fragrance in surprise. Hitherto she had found the little Chinese woman sympathetic and consoling. Chinese ideas of filial duty chimed in with her own. But today, Mrs. Spring Fragrance seemed strangely uninterested and unresponsive. Perhaps, gently suggested the American woman, who was nothing if not sensitive, You have some trouble yourself? If so, my dear, tell me all about it. Oh, no, answered Mrs. Spring Fragrance brightly. I have no troubles to tell. But all the while, I'm thinking about the book I'm writing. A book? Yes, a book about Americans, an immortal book. My dear Mrs. Spring Fragrance, exclaimed her visitor in amazement. The American woman writes the American woman writes books about the Chinese. Why not a Chinese woman write books about the Americans? I see what you mean. Why, yes, of course. What an original idea. Yes, I think that is what it is. My book shall take from the words of others. What do you mean, dear? I listen to what is said. I apprehend. I write it down. Let me illustrate by the inferior woman subject. The inferior woman is most interesting to me because you have told me that your son is in much love with her. My husband advised me to learn about the inferior woman from the superior woman. I go to see the superior woman. I sit on the veranda of the superior woman's house. I listen to her converse with her mother about the inferior woman. With the speed of flames, I write down all I hear. When I enter the house, the superior woman advises me that what I write is correct. May I read it to you? I shall be pleased to hear what you have written, but I do not think you were wise in your choice of subject, returned Mrs. Carman, somewhat primly. I'm sorry I'm not wise. Perhaps I had better not read, said Mrs. Spring Fragrance with humility. Yes, yes, do, please. There was eagerness in Mrs. Carman's voice. What could Ethel Evebrook have to say about that girl? When Mrs. Spring Fragrance had finished reading, she looked up into the face of her American friend, a face in which there was nothing now but tenderness. Mrs. Mary Carman, she said, you are so good as to admire my husband, because he is what the Americans call a man who has made himself. Then why then do you not admire the inferior woman, who is a woman who has made herself? I think I do, said Mrs. Carman slowly. 6. It was an evening that invited to reverie. The far stretches of the sea were gray with mist, and the city itself, lying around the sweep of the bay, seemed dusky and distant. From her cottage window, Alice Winthrop looked silently at the open world around her. It seemed a long time since she had heard Will Carman's whistle. She wondered if he were still angry with her. She was sorry that he had left her in anger, and yet not sorry. If she had not made him believe that she was proud and selfish, the parting would have been much harder. And perhaps had he known the truth and realized that it was for his sake and not for her own, that she was sending him away from her, he might have refused to leave her at all. He was such an imperious nature. And then they would have married, right away. Alice caught her breath a little, and then she sighed. But they would not have been happy. No, that could not have been possible if his mother did not like her. When a gulf of prejudice lies between the wife and the mother of a man, that man's life is not what it should be. And even supposing she and Will could have lost themselves in each other and been able to imagine themselves perfectly satisfied with life together, would it have been right? The question of right and wrong was a very real one to Alice Winthrop. She put herself in the place of the mother of her lover, a lonely elderly woman, a widow with an only son, upon whom she had expended all her love and care ever since. In his early youth, she had been bereaved of his father. What anguish of heart would be hers if that son deserted her for one whom she, his mother, deemed unworthy? Prejudices were prejudices. They were like diseases. The poor, pale, elderly woman, who cherished bitter and resentful feelings towards the girl whom her son loved, was more an object of pity than condemnation to the girl herself. She lifted her eyes to the undulating line of hills beyond the water. From behind them came a silver light. Yes, she said aloud to herself, and though she knew it not, there was an infinite pathos. There was an infinite pathos in such philosophy from one so young. If life cannot be bright and beautiful for me, at least it can be peaceful and contented. The light behind the hills died away. Darkness crept over the sea. Alice withdrew from the window and went and knelt before the open fire in her sitting room. Her cottage companion, the young woman who rented the place with her, had not yet returned from town. Alice did not turn on the light. She was seeing pictures in the fire, and in every picture was the same face and form. The face and form of a fine, handsome young man with love and hope in his eyes. No, not always love and hope. In the last picture of all, there was an expression which she wished she could forget. And yet she would remember, ever, always, and with it these words. Is it nothing to you? Nothing to tell a man that you love him and then bid him to go? Yes, but when she had told him she loved him, she had not dreamed that her love for him and his for her would estrange him from one who, before ever she had come to this world, had pillowed his head on her breast. Suddenly, this girl, so practical, so humorous, so clever in everyday life, covered her face with her hands and sobbed like a child. 2 roads of life had lain before her, and she had chosen the hardest. The warning bell of an automobile passing the crossroads checked her ears. That reminded her that Nellie Blake would soon be home. She turned on the light and went to the bedroom and bathed her eyes. Nellie must have forgotten her key. There she was, knocking. The chill sea air was sweet with the scent of roses as Mary Carmen stood upon the threshold of the little cottage and beheld in the illumination from within the young girl whom she had called the inferior woman. I have come, Miss Winthrop, she said, to beg of you to return home with me. Will, reckless boy, met with a slight accident while out shooting, so could not come for you himself. He has told me that he loves you, and if you love him, I want to arrange for the prettiest wedding of the season. Come, dear. I am so glad, said Mrs. Spring Fragrance, that Will Carman's bird is in his nest, and his felicity is assured. What about the superior woman? Asked Mr. Spring Fragrance. Ah, the superior woman, radiantly beautiful and gifted with the divine right of learning. I love well the inferior woman, but, O great man, when we have a daughter, may heaven ordain that she walk in the groove of the superior woman.